because you're good. And I'm like,
right? And your kids will say stuff to you that you never say to your dad. You couldn't even think that to your dad, right? And so there's a generational thing going on. I've got my dad's voice in me, like my dad would have had his belt off before, right? It would have been over. So he finally comes down, he stomps by and he says, "Fine, I'll rake your stupid leaves." And I wanted to jump up out of my chair because those were my leaves, because I planted that tree that bore those leaves. Because we're men, right? We have pride about a lot of stuff. Don't talk about my leaves that way. So he goes down to the garage, gets the rake. So I look out the window, and here's what he's doing. He's not raking the leaves. He's raking my grass up. Because he's doing it so aggressively and angrily, he's pulling up my lawn. So now I'm furious at that. So now I've got to kind of gather myself. So after a few minutes, I get another rake, I go outside. And so now there are two of us out there. And so I'm starting to rake. And I'm waiting for the apology, because that's all that's on my mind. When is this little kid going to apologize for being a little jerk? If he would have done it last night, I wouldn't have to deal with all of this stuff. All that stuff going through my brain. So I decided to humble myself. And if I had one word that I would leave with today, it's humility. When you are parenting a strong-willed child, humility will break down the walls. If you are intent on just me against you, I'm putting that, look, I would put $1,000 on a 7-year-old, whatever you have, going against this big, ripped ex-Marine or Marine. He will own you. He's not intimidated by it. And all it does is, you may get outward compliance for a while, but inside there will be seething anger. And they will grow up resentful. And a lot of times what happens, especially with the boys, is in their teenage years, they do rebel. Or they'll shut down and say, "You know what? Dad always thought I was a loser." Well, guess what, Dad? Go F yourself. Sorry for the language. But that's that. I hope that didn't offend you. That's what's inside. You've never been happy with anything I've ever done. Always thought I was going to be a loser. So guess what? Here it is. Proud of yourself? And that's from, I almost did that to my son. And I was a pretty good dad. It was just those things that I did. So in that moment I said, "Hey, Case, remember when you were little, we used to rake up the leaves and jump in them? You want to do that?" And you know what he did? He turned his back to me. You don't turn your back to your father. And I had this image in my head of Home Alone 1, the good one. At the end of the movie, when Macaulay Culkin runs through the neighbor's house and it's all wet, and he comes upstairs and the wet bandit hangs him up on the doorway, and a scary neighbor comes over with a shovel and goes boom. I thought, if I take that rake and I hit him the right way over the head, I can bury him in those leaves and nobody will ever see him again. I had murder in my heart for him. So he turned his back on me. So I rake up some leaves. There's a little pile, and I go and I jump in the pile of leaves. And I feel like an idiot. Because now I'm probably a 44-year-old man sitting in these wet leaves. And I don't like the wet leaves because I'm sensory like your kids. He's all icky on my back, and I hate it. Right? And now the kid's over there. He's not even raking the lawn the right way, the leaves up. And finally, he sets down his rake. And I remember the moment because I remember thinking, he just humbled himself. The moment he laid down the rake, he was laying down his own pride. Do you know how hard that is with a father that you respect? Because I knew that he respected me. He didn't treat me with respect all the time. I knew he looked up to me. And when he laid that rake down, that was humbling to him. Because then he knew he had to come and jump in the pile next to me. Now you have two boys in a pile of leaves, awkwardly looking at each other, like, what are we doing? Because he was like 11 at the time. It's not like a 5-year-old, like it's cute. It was stupid. So finally, "Hey, Dad, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things to you. I should have raked the leaves last night." And I said, "You're darn right you should have." I didn't say it. Inside I said that. Right? You're justified. Was there any further lecture necessary? No. He humbled himself, but you lead to contrition. So from then on, one of the code words in our home for a long time was, want to rake the leaves moment? We gonna rake the leaves? Okay, got it, Dad. See, instead of like, remember that time when you didn't rake the leaves and we had to blow up for 3 hours? I just, hey, rake the leaves. Remember, rake the leaves. And then that was enough to trigger. See, you can do the tough discipline. No, I'm not taking you to the ice rink, right? Well, you didn't take me, now my coach is going to be mad. I know. Coach is going to be disappointed. Maybe not, because you're not that good as a defenseman. But coach is going to be disappointed. The other kids are going to be disappointed. So you're just going to have to tell them you didn't make the game because you didn't do what your dad asked you to. Mm-hmm. Wait, I have to tell them that? Well, that's what happened. See, that's me not owning it. You own it. That was your choice, and I'm okay with it. So look, you can prove your point while building the relationship. Does that make sense? Because at the end of all these scenes we've described, instead of you go to your room away from me, come lay in the leaves with me. At the end of it, we're together. And that's what I love about it. It's what I love about the story of the Prodigal Son. At the end of the story, the father's with his son. Right, which is really cool. And by the way, there's a really cool thing in there. If you have a wayward child, whenever I get invited to a church, sometimes they ask me to do, pastor over here might go to your church, but sometimes they say, oh, do you want to do a Sunday sermon? I'm like, I'm not a pastor and I use bad language. So you may not want me to do that. But some churches like that. The cool ones do, that nobody really gets saved or changed in. I'm kidding, but not really. So, anyway, I always do the story of the prodigal son, and what I loved about the story was, I like to contrast it. I would have been waiting at the bottom of the driveway and saying, what were you thinking, Todd? Just going and spending all of our money, the shame you brought on our family. What were you thinking? You know what? You're going to pay for that, son. You're going to pay for that. That would have been in my heart. And I would have made my son pay for months at a time on that. Withholding my affection, always making him do the worst work around the farm. I would have done that. And that father ran to his son. So it was the story of the prodigal son. The story was the love of the father, right? Who ran and forgave. Did he let his son get away with things? No, his son already learned his lesson. But he let him learn his lesson. And then he came back, and then he was fine. It was the well-behaved older child who was the bitter one for the rest of his life. So, I'm not sure I need to do this story. I'm not going to do this story because I don't think I need to. I think I've pretty much pounded that away. I wanted to get that humility part in. So before I do Q&A stuff, let me hit the Q&A stuff that I had from before. Anybody have sibling issues or no? Yes. Okay. Okay, so I can't do everything on siblings, but I want to hit from two areas. So sibling squabbles and fights come from mainly two places. One is boredom. So remember we went through the chart on the first day, and that second column, there's kids that need their brain stimulated. So it's that thing of like, well, I'm bored, so I'm just going to poke my brother or sister, and then everybody reacts to me, and mom's upset and dad's upset. And so what I learned very quickly is if I want everybody to be really intense in the home and get upset, I just look at my brother in a funny way. So that's one. The other way, and then we'll go through solutions for both, and then the other one is Cain and Abel. Which you have a compliant child who's a good child who does everything well, and he knows that everybody likes him or her better. Grandparents, everybody, oh, you're going to be on an honor roll, all those things. And then you've got your strong-willed child who's always in trouble and internalizes, I'm the bad kid and people don't like me. And that's the story of Cain and Abel. From the beginning of time, one of the first stories recorded in human history was so filled with wisdom on what happens in a family. That was before there were guns and video games. A brother killed, first family, right? This is what happens. So if you think you have dysfunction in your home, it's normal. You should have that. Why? Because you're really dysfunctional, messed up, immature people. And so am I. The sooner you encounter, the sooner as an older guy, as soon as I started to acknowledge that, it like liberated and I changed more because instead of fighting and being prideful over it, I was like, yes, we're very messed up. My wife is broken and I am very broken. And so instead of looking at her like, why does she do that? Now I look at her, she's a broken person. Because I know her dad and her mom, right? And she knows mine. And so we're both broken, and then you can do some real work. So in the first case, the boredom part, we kind of talked about this, and I'm going to relate it to screens. Let me tie it into screens. We used that word earlier, purposeful missions. You've got to stimulate those brains. I encourage you with a strong-willed child and your kids to spend much more time saying yes to what they can do. Challenges, difficult things. Make things harder. We had kids in our home, and I had them do my chores, but they wouldn't do it the normal way. But if I said, oh, bet you can't do it blindfolded, they'd love that. Or blindfolded going backwards, because there was a chance they could fall down my stairs and crack their heads open. And they'd love that, because it's stimulating. Doing your chores with your shoes on the wrong foot. I don't care how you do it. I like stimulating the brain. So let me tie this into a screens issue, and then I'll come back to the other thing. So I want to do 3 quick things for screens, and then the larger story that ties into this. One is, if screens are an issue in your home, I would call a family meeting tomorrow, because kids hate family meetings. So guys, we need to have a family meeting. We need to talk about screen usage in our home. They're going to be like, ugh, now you're going to go Amish and cut off electricity, and we won't be able to have anything in our home. So then you start to say, guys, screen usage in our home, out of control. Mom and I, we're on our screens all the time. Pick you up from someplace, my head's in a screen, pull up to a stoplight, I look at my phone. What could Mom and I do to stop being on our screens so much? And they're going to be like, wait, what? This is about you? Yeah, because we're the leaders in the home, and if we can't do it, we can't ask you to do it. It's really cool. I guarantee you none of you are going to do that. I'm kidding. It's really hard. But you know what happens is, if the kids come up with the ideas to help you, they're inadvertently coming up with ideas to help themselves. And once they see you doing it, then they have no excuse, because you're doing it. You don't have to do that, but it's kind of a cool one. I can't even read this one. An apology. This may be, it's usually not homeschooling families so much, because usually you guys are pretty good with the screen stuff. But say you've got a teenager and you gave him or her an iPhone a little bit too soon, because you're like, oh, I'm going to give this and they're going to learn how to control their screens, which is like giving an alcoholic, here's a 6-pack, right? It doesn't usually work. Casey was actually really, really good at managing his screens, and he still is. And I hate him for it a little bit, because he works for me, and we work 24/7 in a sense, and sometimes he'll be out with someone, and I'll be like, you need to be checking your emails. He's like, Dad, I was gone for like 3 hours. I was like, yeah, no, we got some emails, and they were revenue generating, and revenue generating emails, you got to respond to pretty quickly, because we like to have good customer service. And so he's like, well, I check out. And then it'll be like work-life balance. I was like, you don't get work-life balance. You're 28. I get it because I'm 55. Just like you don't get granite countertops when you're 26. Like on whatever that home show is. What is that? House Hunters. Oh, I'll never be happy unless we get granite countertops. I'm like, you're never going to be happy, right? You got to work for that. How many of you had shag carpet and Formica for your first home, right? And your second, your third. How many of you still have that? Sorry about that. Granite's really nice. I'm kidding. Do what? I can tell. And look, your fashion style. You're like me. Just come back in style. Just keep the same stuff. If I come back here in 8 years, I guarantee you, I will be wearing the same exact outfit. I may have washed it in between, but I will have the same exact outfit. So it may be, this may be for a rare thing. Let me do it quickly. Hey Todd, I want to apologize to you, because I gave you, I put this thing in your hand too early, and you're not able to handle it. Now look, some of you can do this for your 8, 9-year-olds with giving them screens, right? Or giving them video games, or your 6-year-olds, whoever it is. Might be able to say, look, I apologize. I put this thing in your hand. It changes who you are. When you have that thing, we fight all the time. It's changing the environment of our home. It's not working. So I apologize for giving it to you too early. So what I want you to know is we're going to take it away. Now, my expectation is you're going to be angry and upset, probably not talk to me for a month. And I'll probably enjoy it. But, no, you're going to be upset at me. If I were you, I would be a little bit upset. See, you don't have to do that, but I didn't take ownership for it. I shouldn't have given it to you. I gave in. I did whatever. And so now I'm going to take it away. That's an honest discussion. And then I've got to figure out stuff to replace it. Does that make sense? Not advocating that. It's up to you guys. So here's a big screens thing for us. So where it all changed, and by the way, you have every right to put limits on and say no, all of that stuff. You have a responsibility to do that. Whatever you want to do with it. But here's where it changed for us. When Casey was about 12, he played Call of Duty 2. He loved that game. And so I used to walk by the room all the time. I don't know why you're playing video games when we were kids. We were outside playing football. It's going to rot your brain. He didn't care. So one day, I walked in his room and I sat down and I said, Casey, I'm curious. I'm curious. He's really drawn to this. You really like him. Why do you want to play so much? And then I listened. And if you listen to your kids sometimes and use that I'm curious tone, you find out. It's like, Dad, order and structure. Every time I play a video game, the rules are the same, consequences are the same. There's not a mom video game and a dad video game with different rules. I know exactly what to expect. It's stimulating. It's purposeful. I have a goal in it, and it's a challenge. True? Right? To get to the next level, whatever it is. He said, it's strategy. I'm really sneaky. I was like, I know. And it's because you have a strategic brain. And he said, I like outsmarting other people, and I have to be a good sniper, which means I have to outsmart them. He said, I also have fun, because I played, it was back when it first came out where you could play other kids around the world. So he said, I also like to taunt the French kids and the British kids that I'm playing with, because we're Americans. And so, right, and he would do his little French voice and his little thing, and then they'd snipe him and kill him. And I was like, okay, that's my son. And here are the main thing. And then he was a social skill. He's like, I connect with other kids this way. It's not the way I want my kids to connect with other kids, but for some of your kids, it's how they do it. When we were kids, we got to hang out outside all the time. We were at the 7-Eleven proverbially, and we got to do all of that. Your kids are sometimes, that's how they do it. But the big one that got me, he said, Dad, I'm not really that good at school, and I'm not always really good at behavior, but I'm really good at Call of Duty. And I'm a leader, and I form the teams, and I'm bossy, and I tell people what to do, and they do, and we win a lot. And what I got out of that is it's competence and confidence. It was one area of his life where he felt like, I'm good, and it makes me feel good about myself, and other people acknowledge it. Does that make sense? It's not a justification for it, but it helps you go deeper than like, oh, they just want to be on screens because they're lazy. In a lot of your kids' cases, there's needs being met. So this is kind of our general approach to changing behavior. Think about this analogy. It's late in the afternoon and your kids start acting up. Just saying, hey, you need to behave better. Stop it. Nothing changes. If you feed them a snack, all of a sudden behavior changes. Or give them a nap. Behavior changes. You didn't change their behavior. You fed them inside and then that changed their behavior. So I started thinking, okay, so this kid is doing this because it's meeting 5 or 6 critical or key needs inside of him. If I want to get him off of this, I have to meet those same needs in another area. I have to replace it. Now, I don't have to. I'm the adult in the home. If I want to go Amish and I want to cut off the electricity, I can. I get rid of all the video games if I want. You have every right to do that. I don't have a problem with that at all. But in this case, where we were living in his friend group, it was a big deal to play that game. So I started coming in and I said, Casey, and I started explaining to him, here's what it's doing. I get it now. I understand why you would want to do that. That's that acknowledgement part. Of course you would want to play a game that met all these things, rather than dismissing, like, stupid game, if you do this, you're never going to go. So I said, what else do you want to do that would stimulate your brain, or what would be something? And he said, I want to learn how to fly airplanes. And I was like, well, that's a bad choice, because it's really expensive, and I have a fear of flying. And you're a jerk for doing it. Because he was opposite of me in just every way like that. So I went over to the local airport and I found out flight lessons were $50 a lesson, expensive. And I said, Casey, here's the deal. I'll pay for 25 of it if you pay for the other 25. He's like, where am I going to get a job? Where am I going to make money? I was like, get a job. He's like, I'm 13. He's like, okay, then be creative. You want to fly or don't you? So I let him struggle with that a little bit. Well, it turns out at the ice hockey rink, he could be an ice hockey referee. So he wasn't a very good player. He wasn't. He just wasn't. And you'll find that with a lot of your kids, they're strategic. They'll be a better coach than they are a player because they tend to just watch things go by. Or some of your kids just aren't coordinated. So guys, you're just going to have to give it up. They're not going to be like you. They're going to be awkward, and you're just going to be embarrassed by it. How many guys are embarrassed sometimes by your child? How many of you are embarrassed by your child at times? Raise your hands. Raise your hands like a real man, Marine. Sorry, I just wanted to do that. For a safe enough distance, I'm calculating if I get out that door. I can't. Look, he's like, you can't. He's like, I know where everybody is in here. I'm calculating. You're like, what's his name? Jason Bourne, right? The Bourne Identity. I run 65 miles per hour at 6,500 feet above sea level. Flat out. I don't know why, Bree. Anybody else love Bourne Identity? Can't stop watching it every time it comes on? Anyway. And then the third or fourth one got lame. But anyway. So, I don't know where I was, Marine man. Yeah, I was embarrassed. You get embarrassed, fine. So anyway, so what happens is he goes and he becomes an ice hockey referee. This is an important story for this reason. With a strong-willed child, remember we talked about encouraging their curiosity and following what they're good at. You put my son on the ice in playing, not very good. You put him on the same ice rink wearing a striped shirt, where he gets a whistle and gets to blow the whistle and put other children in a penalty box and be completely in control and be decisive. Ice hockey referee, what they teach them is you don't have to get every call right, but you have to be consistent so everybody knows what to expect. He was decisive. You know what else he was? Oppositional. He's a 13-year-old kid. If any of you have ice hockey kids? Okay, so you know that parents are absolute freaks. Worse than Texas parents with football. It's nuts because of all the money you're paying and you're getting up super early. So you know what it's like when a ref makes a bad call. There are 40-year-old men yelling at my son. Their coach is screaming at him. So there's this coach one day. This is my favorite case of story ever, why I love my son. So coach is screaming and ref, you think, you don't know what you're doing. So most of the other kids, when a coach is yelling, will skate to the other side of the rink and they'll switch places. Not my oppositional son. He backs up to the coach, watching the plays while the coach, letting the guy yell in his ears. And partway through, he turns around and says, Coach, do you need a Kleenex? Meaning, stop your crying. Now, was that disrespectful to an adult? Yes. Was I really happy that he did it? Absolutely. But the point is, my son didn't mind when all the fans in the stands were screaming at him. He wasn't intimidated. It made him not a very good player, but a fantastic referee. He got up early. This is that mission and mentor thing. So I told him, Casey, if you want to make more money, because they pay him a lot of money, they make $40 a game. So I said, go tell your boss. You'll take the earliest game. You'll take any game that other refs don't want. So we got all like the mini mites, those little kids that can't even skate at 6 a.m. He got all those games. Now I took a cut of that because I'd get up early to take him to the rink. Not stupid. But he learned how to be responsible. And he started making some good cash. That's physical. Some of your kids love the cash. So now he's paying for his flights. When he's flying, what is more stimulating than knowing you could die? And they let him take the reins of it. They did the forced stall thing, right? If they did the forced stall where you stall out going upwards and you start to die. That teaches you how to remain calm. And so, watch, guess what did he stop doing so often?
Playing Call of Duty.
Playing Call of Duty too, because we've replaced it. Now, I don't know what it is for you, but it could be, but I do know with these kids, please write this down, they like doing adult things for other adults. They don't like doing kid things for their parents. That's actually really good. I'm gonna write that down. No, that's a good way to conceptualize it. Forgive me for that, but so adult things. So I know it's hard. Like if you're on a ranch, you don't really have neighbors or anything. But look for those opportunities to do adult type things. A lot of them are driven by money. They're not greedy. They like money, but they also have big hearts. So at times you can get them giving. Your sensitive kids, you can get them earning money, and then they'll give it all away. And I can teach them, like, no, don't give it all away. Right? Like if you want to tithe or double tithe, give 20% of it, but keep some of it, reinvest in your business. Teach them how to run their business. Sorry for this. I'll use that sometime on a podcast. I don't know if we have a podcast. Just Google. It's called Calm Parenting Podcast, and we have one called Calm Christian Podcast too. So I do a little bit more scriptural and stuff on that one. The other one. So if I don't get to something, look this is a podcast. And for parents. Okay, so so that's my screen thing. That was awkward, wasn't it? So that's my screen thing. End of that story. So back to the sibling part. That relates to the sibling part of I want them doing other things rather than being around the house. Space and place. I like the word space and place. I like to give kids a space and place to do different things. If you do live in a neighborhood or a community, doing something for neighbors, doing something for an older couple down the street. Homeschoolers, please take advantage of, not take advantage of, but utilize the wisdom of older people in your church and community. They will take your kids in, and they will tutor them, and they will do stuff for them because they're lonely, and they're just sitting there all day waiting for Jeopardy to come on, right? And so you give them a purpose and a mission to do that. Some of you have 6, 7 kids. I'm looking at you, lady. You got a lot of kids, 7 kids, and so to have someone who helps out, I'll guilt trip you on this one, because I know that'll work on you. She's a very sweet mom. So, because moms are all, I don't want to inconvenience, I don't want to ask for help, right? Because I don't want to bother you. Because I can tell they're the moms who come up afterwards like, oh, I know your time's important, I don't want to bother you. And I'm like, that's a pattern you have in you. You have to stop. I didn't mean to point you out, but I am. So we all do that, right? I don't mean, I'm sorry. You did that when we were talking earlier. You did that at least 7 times. And you stop. See, good for you. You're a very courageous young woman here. So the guilt trip part is, if you don't ask that older couple or other people for help, you're robbing them of the joy that they would get from having something to do, right? It's like, here, I have 7. Just take 5. Right? I'll take 2 easy ones. Yeah. Feed them. No, don't send them home. Just feed them. It's helpful. So the other part of the sibling thing is the child who doesn't feel good about himself will often take it out on the other child. So honestly, the same thing applies. It's a confidence issue. When I'm feeling good about myself, I don't feel the need to judge and put other people down. Right? When I'm not feeling good about myself, then I tend to tear other people down to make myself feel good. So how do you build confidence? Competence. It's the same, in many ways it's the same answer. Purposeful missions. Maybe write this down. In our society now, we tend to, because we're very engaged parents, we tend to spend 80% of our energy trying to fix what we perceive is wrong with our kids. True? Rather than spending 80% of our time accentuating what they're really good at. As homeschoolers, you have some flexibility of saying, look, my son is not going to be a scientist. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on science class. He's not going to do that. But he's a future engineer. Put the time into teaching him how to be an engineer, whatever he or she wants to be. Do that. It's going to take courage because, well, I want a well-balanced child. I want a child who follows his curiosity and his passion because it's in there for a reason. And I would encourage you to follow that even if you don't see the logical outcome or a practical outcome of it. It's in there for a reason. And I personally, and this isn't advice, this is my personal view of it, is I would rather have a child following his curiosity and his passions and doing it and loving it and doing it really well than just trying to fit him in to go through some arbitrary things over here. And again, I'm biased because I see a lot of things as very arbitrary. I tend to start from the beginning of what are the qualities necessary for success in life, and then back out of that. That's why often when Casey and a lot of the kids we work with are in public schools, they would come home with their report card, but I had my own report card. And you may even do that with your strong-willed child. Say, look, here's your school report card, and here's your life skills report card. So in school, follow and direct, do all those things, you're okay. Do really well in some classes, struggle a little bit in the other classes, I can help you out with that. But here are the qualities I'm really looking for. Leadership, passion, right? All the things that don't get measured in traditional school. Problem solving, observing human nature, making inappropriate jokes at Christmas that are really inappropriate but really funny about their relatives, so I can't stop laughing. How many of you have those kids? You know what that is, right? It's observation of human nature. They get people. Some of your kids are acquainted with a lot of pain. They feel different. They feel odd. They've had hard things happen to them. And what will come out of that is they will often be very sensitive to other people who feel pain. Some of your kids will, I don't know whether this just triggered, so I'm going to go with it. Some of your kids will want to be a part of causes that you disagree with politically. Right? They might have like certain things because they care about maybe people they perceive like oppressed people, and they'll become part of this. This happens a lot. I get a lot of emails about this, so that's why I mentioned it. It might not be relevant here. But it's like, oh, my daughter's getting really into like social justice stuff, right? And it freaks us out, right? It's like, oh, no, not critical race theory. Okay? Which is awesome for people who are all white in an all white state getting all upset about it. So, is this kidding trigger you? So, right? Like, when's the last time you saw a black person? So,
Yesterday.
I'm kidding. So, no, I'm saying, that was really, I shouldn't have said that. But it is that. No, because I've spent the last year, look, I spent the last year, I grew up for 54 years having very definitive conservative principles about certain classes of people and what they needed in their community. And then I went in the community and spent a year in there, and 9 months in, after I'd proved myself, and then I asked them questions, and they were like, wait, what? I was like, no, this is what's wrong in your community. And they were like, what do you mean? And so some of it, like, I'll give you one. The black community, fatherlessness, because that's big on my heart, because if you don't have fathers in the community, it's going to fall apart. So I was like, well, and they were like, yes, it's a big problem. It's in our music. And I brought, well, government programs to it. Yeah, government programs have contributed to that. But you know what else contributed to it? When our first families came to this country, they were split up from their families. And then after slavery was over, then they had these, the black codes, so they had these laws in which they still split up families, and black people, a lot of black men are in jail. Part of the reason there are no black fathers is because they go to jail and I don't. I've got pulled over 3 times in the last month for driving stuff. Because I don't have a lot of, I'm good, but whatever. So each time I got a warning. So I'm talking to them and they were like, I don't get a warning. I get my car searched. And I get this done. And then they find I have an outstanding thing because I didn't have money. I'm not pleading the case from a liberal point of view. I'm saying that as you get older and you listen to people, you realize you don't know, I don't know the whole story. I know part of the story, but now I'm starting to learn, oh, I hadn't realized. So a kid growing up and his dad and his uncle are in jail, pretty comfortable with jail. My son would be horrified going to jail. I would be even more horrified. You think I'm going to last more than like 3 hours in jail? You know I'm not talking. So, but they're acquainted with it. So let me tell you a story. So we're out, so I'm playing with it. So I'm trying to teach these kids how they're still counting on their freaking hands in 7th and 8th grade because they don't have 2 parents. Your kids come home, you've got math tables up there. You're quizzing them at dinner. They're coming home to a single mom who's working 3 jobs. They don't know how to add and subtract in 7th and 8th grade. So I'm trying to teach them. So we're going outside throwing a ball against the thing, and I'm trying to teach them math while we're catching a ball. So we have to make it a game. You can only catch with your left hand or that one. And then they get me like, well, if you give me money if I catch it. I'm like, sure. So now they're taking all my money. So I teach them, well, let's go double or nothing. They're like, that sounds good. And I was like, I'm going to throw this ball in such a way you're never going to catch it. Right? And I get my money back. So I'm like, you're not the only one who's street smart, little jerk. So we're doing this. And one of my first days there, 2 kids get in a fight. And they hit. Like, I grew up in little fights in my neighborhood, like little white kids, little wrestling stuff. They hit, and they hit hard. So so the next day, one kid throws a rock and throws it right past my face at another kid. And I was like, I'm out. I'm not doing this. Because I don't want my face hurt. And I don't love the kids that much. So, and they go after each other. And I'm like, dude, you gotta learn how to control yourself. You gotta learn when to walk away. And the kid says, if I walk away, my mama whoops me. So I went in and talked to the director and I said, look, am I gonna get the kids hurt here? Because I'm coming in from a whole different place. And he said, there's a code here. There is. There's a deep-seated thing of respect. And you'll hear it. Maybe you watch NFL, wide receivers, respect. Everything's respect. And it goes way, 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 way back. It goes way back to slavery with the whole respect thing. It is deep-seated. Again, not making political statements, just saying, you've got to understand there's another side to the story. And so this guy said, you might get some of those kids hurt. You don't encourage them to fight. But I was taking my point of view, like walk away. So anyway, I'm learning so much from them. They're really good kids, but they don't grow up with the same mindset. Like I was trying to explain it to my family. It's really, really conservative. Like, okay, so see that building over there? I know how to get there. There's a path and you walk there. And what they were explaining is, I've got a lot of obstacles you don't see to get to that. To even think about going to that building, I don't even have that thought. So the stuff that I grew up with was, I just knew eventually I'd work hard and I'd be successful. It's not in the mindset. They don't have a role model. My son has so many people, if something happened, he has all these people that we know who have money and resources to help him. They don't have it. Nobody that they know, they haven't been out of Wilmington, North Carolina. I asked them, have you ever been here? No. Have you ever actually been out of the city? So one of the things I'm trying to think of is taking them on field trips, just to expose them that there's a bigger world. Talking to them about college, or to go to college. They don't know anybody who's been to college. It's not in their minds. So anyway, I don't know why I brought that up. I just ask you, I'll ask you as a Christian, is that sometimes I know, because I've been a hardcore conservative my whole life, that I always knew everything. And this is why I wanted to do it. I get emails like, well, we want to raise our children to be obedient to God. Nothing wrong with that. But then my question is, what does that mean? Oh, you just want, and nobody really defined, well, you want to be obedient to God. Well, obedient to do what? So what I like to drill down and say, well, God said there are the two big commandments. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. So maybe the goal in your family isn't to be obedient to God, because it's so vague. I don't know what it means. How about I want to raise my kids so that they love their neighbors as they love themselves? Now that, I can put some skin on it. Does that make sense? So I don't know if that irritated you more or is helpful, and maybe one day you'll find it helpful. I don't mean to be offensive with it at all. It's just, I share everything that's going through my life, and it's something that I'm learning, and I'm repenting of all those past years when I just sat back and thought that I had all the answers and pronounced it on other people, and now I'm realizing I never loved those people. I just wanted a policy because I didn't want my taxes to go up, right? And so and big government sucks. But if you go down to that community center, that's all they have. If the government doesn't give them a program, and I know that makes them dependent, but it goes way, 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 way back. Anyway, forgive me for that. So let me end on this. What time is it? 2:28. Never done that before. So, sorry about that. You want me to do my story on a...
Keep going. Keep going.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the tepid applause from 3 people. I'm kidding. No, I don't. I was going to do an F you dad story, but I won't do that one. Because that's not good. My mom passed away last Sunday. So I'm a little bit more emotional this week. So we're at dinner last night, and Casey starts telling me, I want to do this because it's important. He's got a lot of friends that are gay. I didn't know any gay people growing up. You know what I call my brothers? Kind of gay epithet. It's what we grew up talking. My brother still says it. Hey, it's what we grew up with. I didn't know anybody. So my son, because he's a millennial, knows everything. I'm like, Casey, you know, so he's got a friend named Mari. She's sweet. She's a lesbian girl. She came and stayed at our house. Her parents are Christians, and they've rejected her. So I talked to Mari. I'm like, so did you ever date boys? She says, yeah, I dated. Do you think that if I could have liked boys a lot, don't you think that would have been a lot easier for me? I wanted to. I just didn't. And I don't know how all that works. But I've talked to enough people to know. Guys, I tried. I dated a lot of girls. It didn't work. But I always felt comfortable. And you can talk about there's something wrong with the dad and all these other things. I don't know. But this girl, Casey starts telling me the story last night of how they're basically disowning her. And it kills me, because she's a really sweet girl. You would like her. But we sit back sometimes, and it's not just the judging, it's that we put policy and theories above people. And these black kids in this neighborhood, there's no white people ever come down there. We just sit because I don't want my taxes raised, so you don't get these programs because it make you dependent. Well, you don't know what happened to my grandfather and my father. And then I tell my mom, because my mom was always like, oh, I was like, what was it like when you were a kid? Well, when I was a kid, black people in Baltimore had a curfew. Because she was always like, oh, I love the old days. It used to be better back in the old days. I was like, yeah, for you. But when I was a kid, black people couldn't use the same restaurant or the same water fountain. What do you think that... See, we travel a lot to Eastern Europe. We've spoken in Eastern Europe. And what fascinates me when I go to Estonia or Bulgaria is what happens to the mindset when for 40 years you live under communist rule and the state does everything and they control your thinking. How does that mess with your brain? And you see people like the Estonians who threw off the singing revolution, threw off communism. They're very, very capitalist-free people. Then you go to like Hungary, Budapest, and they're still back longing for it because there's a certain amount of security. If you talk to old people in the former Soviet states, they long for communism. You know why? Security. It's safe. I had a job, I knew where to be every day, and we had food. And you know what else? They had safety. It was safe. There was no crime back in those days, so to speak. It wasn't awesome. We've stayed in, we traveled there, we stay in like Soviet-era apartments. They're not so awesome. But there's a certain safety to it. And the mindset. And so what I'm trying to understand with these black kids is, what's the mindset when your dad, when he was a kid, couldn't eat at the same restaurant or had to sit in the back of a bus? How many generations, how long does that take to change that mindset until you start to feel the same way? What does it feel like when you're a black person, you walk into a room and you're the only black person? And they were telling me, they're funny, they're not bitter at all, and they don't want big government stuff. They said, we talk differently. When we see white people coming, we have to change the way we talk because we know we're seen as a scary black man. They use those words. They said, when we're at a restaurant, this one guy told me, and again, not bitter at all, really sweet people. He's like, I was at a restaurant at McDonald's, it was during COVID time, and they weren't taking credit cards, and an old white guy was there. They weren't taking credit cards, and the old white man was like, I didn't know that, and I don't have any cash, and complaining, and they gave him a free breakfast. That's McDonald's, so it's not a big deal. But the guy said, I got up there, And I knew if I started to talk like that, everybody gets tense because it's the angry black guy who's doing it. That girl, Mari, I want us to pray for people like that. I'm not asking to accept, I don't accept the policies that my black friends are advocating for necessarily. And I'm not advocating for accepting whatever it is morally, but accepting the person. That's how your kids will see. Casey has told me, and I'll close up here. So Casey has told me recently, he said, Dad, your mom told us all this stuff, and you taught me scripture like the whole childhood, and you taught us all this stuff and all these principles, and he read all the books, and we used to read the Constitution, and we did all that good stuff. But he said, what has finally made me see compassion and wanting to follow God is how you guys are treating other people. And how you're stretching yourselves and not just staying like that. And I just encourage you, I don't even know what I'm saying, so love you all. I'll see some of you at 5 o'clock, but I have to stop. And if you have questions, not about that stuff, but about parenting stuff, come up and see me. But thank you all, and thank you again to the person who donated that set of CDs. And anyway, if you want to talk, I'm going to head down to the exhibition hall, and we will be back at 5 o'clock. I won't do any of this at the marriage thing, I promise you. So anyway, thanks very much.